In police work, when people say that there's that code of silence, it's the truth.
When you speak out against one, you're speaking out against them all.
People think it's a brotherhood of law enforcement. Well, there's also the fear of retaliation.
If you're the victim of racism, sexism, if you see corruption, if you see excessive force, keep your big mouth shut or you immediately become a threat. And it's as black and white as the police cars that we drive.
This is Fontana Police Department, where I worked for 17 years, devoted 17 long years of my life, but yet I was walked out like a common criminal.
So what you do is you let this portion spin in your hand, and you would lift your own hand up so you don't end up striking any portion of your body. And you would whip it frontwards and backwards. One of the things that attracted me to the position of law enforcement was going to the police station with my dad. And that, of course, makes quite an impression on a young man seeing your father in uniform. And my assumption was that anything that law enforcement did was okay, or otherwise they couldn't do it.
We all go back to the Adam 12 TV series, where I would watch as a kid how professional they were. It's a prestigious position where you're honest, you're fair. It was more like a hero role.
In my community, there was a time where criminal activity was rampant. Crack cocaine hit the streets and there was a lot of violence. And as I looked around the community, I wanted to make a difference in society.
So this is basically my 18-year career right here. I started in Fontana in 2002, and I was a patrol officer until 2007 when I got promoted to the rank of corporal. My first Employee of the Month award for catching a robbery suspect. They robbed a gentleman at an ATM. I always had hope and ambition that I'm going to get up higher in the organization.
Let's go. Ready? I had 18 years of service with the Fontana Police Department. Good job. Nice catch. Where I was a robbery homicide detective.
This is a case that has shocked the senses of the most veteran investigators.
I enjoyed solving cases and, in those 2 a.m. phone calls.
This is my commencement ceremony where I graduated, class of 1 of 96. In 1995, I applied for the Los Angeles Police Department. I was part of the mobile field force unit. And in 2000, I decided to get closer to my home. So I looked through the Inland Empire, and the Fontana Police Department seemed like an organization that I could happily work for.
This was my uniform that I wore. Still clean and pressed. When I was working at Fontana, I was called to service to serve in Iraq, and I was decorated. I also served in Afghanistan and was given an award by the Afghan National Police. I came to Fontana to buy the American dream. And my whole dream was one day when I retire from the police department that I would go into city council and possibly make a run for the mayor. I just love Fontana.
Fontana has come a long way. You have people that drive from the LA area to Fontana because they'll get a lot more housing space for their money. And they've only come within the last 20 years. At one time, there was the orange groves. Today, we have a lot of manufacturing taking place. You have Napa auto industry, you have Mercedes-Benz plants here, you have large distribution warehouses that have taken advantage of the vast unused land that's down here. The freight trucks that come and go, sad to say, there's a lot of truckers who transport narcotics, stolen goods. So there was a great need for undercover officers, a great need for officers to work in the community and target that illicit activity. As soon as I signed up with the Fontana Police Department, I started noticing it was different. It was a predominantly Caucasian organization, which I didn't have a problem with. But I did notice that The minorities there seemed very stressed and very reserved. As of 2008, you can only see one black officer there, another black officer here, this guy was a recruit, and myself, and that's it. So a total of 3 out of over 200 officers.
It was a culture shock. I started realizing that, for a community that's, 70% Hispanic, the numbers of the department were really disproportionate.
All the upper management was all white. I was one of the few Mexican-American police officers. I had heard the stories of former Mexican-American police officers that worked at Fontana PD and left, specifically because of racism. One thing to say about racism, you can't see it, but you can certainly feel it, and I felt it.
There's a lot of history in Fontana that people don't realize. So as we go down on Banana Street, we'll approach the steel mill. This was the bread and butter for many years for Fontana blue-collar workers.
Fontana, a few miles from Los Angeles, is the home of the largest steel mill west of the Mississippi River.
Henry J. Kaiser, now furnishing steel for the sinews of war.
Come 1941, Kaiser Steel in Fontana was employing thousands of people to run that steel mill 24/7. So you had a problem with the fact that a lot of the able-bodied men who were working in the steel mills were being drafted to go fight the war.
A mass migration is pouring into the 7 western states, eager to share in the industrial expansion of a region where people want to live.
And a lot of these workers that were brought to Fontana specifically came from the Deep South, the very Deep South, where there was, deep-seated racism.
If you Google Fontana, you'll see that one of its nicknames is Funtucky. A lot of minorities were coming into the community and taking steel mill jobs. Blacks were pushed into the upper areas closer to the north, away from the center cities of Fontana. My uncle owned property up here, and he warned me that the KKK used to burn crosses on his lawn. And he questioned why I would even want to come to Fontana, and I told him, Unc, that's a thing of the past. Well, it wasn't necessarily that far from the past. One day, I had a call in this area, and I came across a rather large house, and I found out that it was actually the home of the Grand Wizard of the KKK. From what I heard, there would be Klan rallies held in the backyard. Back in the days, they marched up and down downtown Main Street to City Hall. And they attacked quite a few people who came into this community. The shooting of Dover Howard and the burning of the black family, those were just severe incidents. There was a culture of white supremacy in Fontana. And I'm here to tell you that some of that old negativity still permeate the halls of Fontana Police Department.
The first eye-opening instant that I really saw something was up was we're sitting there in briefing and they wanted to do a ninja hunt. And I'm like thinking, what the hell's a ninja hunt? Later I found out a ninja was a derogatory term for African American.
I would be in the locker room getting dressed and I'd hear the word nigger thrown around. And I'd go around and look who it was, and here you have 2 supervisors standing there with an astonished look on their face like, oop, we've been caught.
BAMA is it's an acronym, and it stands for Black Male Adult. BAFA is a Black Female Adult. And this is stuff that they say on the radio. I got a BAMA running from me southbound on, Sierra. It's like, it doesn't sound like they're humans.
You could tell that they didn't want nothing to do with the Mexican community. They would make fun of me saying, oh, you're probably into cockfighting, you know what you Mexicans do.
There was a time when I was on patrol, and it's Christmas time, and Fontana is predominantly, Hispanic. So they thought it'd be funny to run a game to impound cars with Christmas trees. And then you'd be ruining the Christmas of undocumented people, which is cruel.
When I achieved the award of Officer of the Year, I was told by several close Caucasian colleagues that they said that they can't believe they gave the award to a nigger. You look at my arrest record and you look at the things that I accomplished, it far surpassed most of my white colleagues. Yet every time a promotion came around, I was skipped over. There was a time where I became intrigued with the symbology that I've noticed within the department. Not only was it closely related to neo-Nazi paraphernalia, it was also related to local street gangs that are white supremacists, such as Hell's Angels. If you look closely here at this patch, you'll see the sinister red eyes on this owl, and you'll see the keys depicted here in the skull of this owl, and you'll see RRT, which is supposed to stand for Rapid Response Team. These were Nordic runes. I searched throughout the United States law enforcement databases and throughout the internet. I have never found any agency who utilizes Nordic runes, which are related to white supremacy, for their logos. Officers would actually wear these patches, and they also had this symbol inside of the chief's office at one time. This is not a coincidence that we find these same symbols on white supremacists that we find for Fontana Police Department. It shows to an outsider that this agency is sympathetic and believes in the same ideologies as your street white supremacist gang member.
My name is Alan Hofstetter. I am the founder and chairman of the American Phoenix Project. Some of you know I was one of those guys that was out there at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. How many of you here know that that was a total false flag staged event? Yeah, that's kind of what I thought.
1776! Recently I was made aware that our former Deputy Chief, Alan Hofstetter, was involved in the insurrection at the Capitol.
President Trump must be inaugurated. There must be long prison terms, while execution is the just punishment for the ringleaders of this coup.
I was shocked that any law enforcement officer would have participated in any attack against our country's Capitol building. Not to mention the fact that many officers were hurt and injured during that incident. He's a person that spiraled out into these extremist views because of the environment that he was raised in there. Over the course of my career, I started hearing about complaints of use of force and police brutality. In custody deaths, I started hearing about the stomping of the trachea and the crushing of another person's spleen. And 3 people died in a matter of 5 months. I personally witnessed when officers were involved in questionable shootings or violent acts. Instead of them being disciplined, they actually were promoted. Here we are today, and we're starting to see more and more cases arise. Hey! Very few have garnered discipline from the administration.
You want to talk about racism? I got a story for you. In 1994, I was assigned to our crime prevention unit. Myself and another employee from the unit were asked to attend an autopsy of a murder victim by the name of Jimmy Burleson. And Jimmy Burleson was an African-American male, and he had been found behind a Kentucky Fried Chicken. So at one point during the autopsy, there was this technician, and he comes in and he looks at the victim and says, "Hey, did you notice this over here?" And he's pointing, and I'm not sure what he's pointing at. What it ended up being was an eaten drumstick from a piece of chicken. And he goes on to say, wow, looks like even though he was getting stabbed to death, he still managed to hold on to the fried chicken. This technician had just returned from lunch, and he went back and retrieved one of his eaten drumsticks and placed it in his hand. I think he thought we were going to laugh right away. But we had a visceral reaction to it. It was just absolutely horrible. I reported it, but pretty much in the end, the case was corrupt. I don't think anything happened as far as any investigation, and certainly not any disciplinary action.
When I finally seen the Burleson photo, I was astonished and outraged. I could not believe that any human being would degrade and desecrate a defenseless corpse. The stereotype of black men eating chicken. It's outrageous. The murder has never been solved, and throughout the history of Fontana, how many supervisors, how many people of power knew about this incident and failed to investigate it? To think of the damage that these people were capable of doing under the guise of a badge. One would say, why did you stay? I wasn't gonna let rogue cops, racist cops push me away from the job that I loved, and a good paying job at that. I would rather stay and fight and hope that people around me would join the fight and we could clean up the department. My partner, Andy Anderson, and I started to report the incidents of police misconduct and also racism within the department.
When you approach your police administration as an officer or as any police employee and you expose corruption or this is happening, racism, sexism, any of those things, they immediately resent and kill the messenger. They just don't like whistleblowers, period.
You start going out there and start questioning, soon you're going to be labeled as a rat. That's a death wish. And if they want to make it rough on you, they will.
I came to my locker room one day and I noticed somebody broke into my locker. I opened it up and my locker was disheveled. Clearly someone searched my locker. And then I was followed home and surveillance was conducted on my home.
I ended up getting removed from narcotics, and it was for the needs of the department. And there's no other justification for it.
The final straw was when my partner Andy Anderson and I were falsely accused of misconduct by the Fontana Police Department.
My career was basically done to the point where I would always be an officer. I would never promote. So my dreams of making lieutenant, of making captain, and making positive change were gone. They were dead.
You had city council personnel. I reported it to them. I wrote numerous grievances to them.
So Dave and I had talked and we said, you know what, this needs to stop. They think they could do whatever they want and destroy people's lives, and they're not going to do that to us.
No update on the mediation hearing that we just attended. In 2016, we decided to file a discrimination lawsuit against the Fontana Police Department. In this lawsuit, we outlined the various discriminatory actions and the fact that we were retaliated against and skipped over for promotion. I hoped that it would bring change. After I filed the lawsuit, I expected them to back off. But instead, the anger intensified and they wanted to make a statement and an example out of us.
I was already suffering from anxiety disorders and some other issues, like you couldn't sleep and stuff. And I was walked into the captain's office and they told me they were worried about my mental well-being. They sent me to the doctor and I was ruled, mentally unfit to be an officer, and I never went back to work another day.
They falsely accused me of violating a department policy by leaving my wife on my insurance until I was completely divorced, and they forced me out.
Won't need that ever again.
This case has been going on 6 years.
Law enforcement investigative material is done.
We've lost an exorbitant amount of money, and we have had to downsize into a much smaller house.
Better worth recycling. Maybe keeping it.
The process of this lawsuit has been excruciatingly tiring, and it's caused a tremendous amount of stress on my family.
Ready for school tomorrow?
at school. He's a big boy. Love you.
Love you.
Yeah. You tired?
Yeah.
Papa's tired too. I can never ever get this case to end. I have to constantly think about it, and I have to constantly revisit the pain that was inflicted upon me over the course of my career there.
I didn't set out to be a whistleblower at all. I wanted to finish my career. I had a young daughter and a wife. I don't have a degree. I had no other skills. I'm basically a police officer is what I could do. Going through the termination process gave me anxiety, and I had trouble sleeping. You know, that stress of that every day was very, very hard.
Right now, it's just over our heads. It's just there. It's like, at some point, we need closure.
I'm not the same person. My wife, she's broken down many times crying that she wants her old husband back. You know, and it actually chokes me up sometimes because I know I'm messed up, and I know I'm not who I was, and I miss that person. You know, sometimes you question it, was it even worth it? You know, the mental anxiety and stress that it puts upon you, and it's always in the back of your head. Once everything's said and done, you know, we want to leave California, and the main reason is I want to get far from Fontana. I'm just afraid I might get stopped one day and evidence or, you know, contraband planted in my car, or I don't want to be close to their sphere of influence, to their power. I just want to get away and put that chapter of my life completely behind me.
American policing has a problem with white supremacy, and when it manifests itself, it needs to be dealt with.
Saying this as a conservative, Republicans are the worst violators because they're the ones who are mostly the ones in power in law enforcement.
You know, a lot of people look at you as a cop and they hate the police over just the one paintbrush. They hate all law enforcement. Here we are, officers wanting to expose the corruption from within. We have firsthand knowledge. We've experienced it. We've been through it. We've seen it. We've witnessed it. We've been victimized by it. We're doing this to make policing what society wants it to be and what it should be and what people expect.
We are hoping that we'll encourage other people to speak up, but we're also hoping to shed light on the process in which it takes to speak up. I still believe in our country, in our law enforcement, and I believe in our criminal justice system. But I cannot give up the fight, and I will not give up the fight.
All these three-letter agencies, they have perfected these false flag events around the world. They've been doing it since long before I was born. This goes deep. We really are possibly watching maybe one of the most amazing sting operations in the history of law enforcement or the military is taking place right now. But in the end, it's going to be a glorious future once we get past this war that we are currently in.